Hello and welcome to our Healthcare Leadership Panel on Peer Coaching. We're so pleased to be able to share the latest research proving the effectiveness of peer coaching in improving clinician well-being. And we're honored to have an esteemed panel of healthcare leaders from across the country joining us today to discuss the experiences of their organizations and clinicians in using peer coaching, how they've successfully promoted peer coaching in their organizations, and much more. My name is Sarah Prom, Senior Director of Solution Delivery with Vital WorkLife. Vital WorkLife is a national behavioral health consulting practice supporting all dimensions of well-being in the workplace. We're passionate about helping physicians to be their best selves. So in 2007, we launched a dedicated healthcare solution offering physician-focused behavioral health resources. And today, we're looking forward to sharing our own research as well as best practices and experiences with peer coaching. Before we get started with a discussion, we're going to start out with a poll to see who's with us today in our session and who's available in terms of asking, answering questions, participating in our time together. So the question that we have today is, what is your role? It's great to understand who's joining us today so we know who's here. The panelists can then tailor some of their answers to who's on the webinar and the different roles that people hold within our group today. It will also give you, the participant, an idea of who else is on the call as you think about questions you may ask or things that you'd like to know from those that are participating today. Please be sure to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions that you have throughout our time together. The exciting part about the research and the subsequent discussion plan for our time today is that the learnings and the best practices can really be applied in various ways, regardless of the role that you have in the organization or the stage that you're at along your own well-being journey or the work that you and your organization are doing to affect well-being system-wide. So let's take a look at what our results are telling us from those of you that are participating. So we can see that we have a good spectrum here of folks that are with us to look at the research that exists and to hopefully take away some ideas of how to either talk in different ways about well-being, implement new well-being strategies within your organization, or just gain some understanding about the value and the efficacy of peer coaching. Now I'd like to introduce Liz Ferron. Liz has been with Vital WorkLife since 2001, has her master's degree in social work from the University of Minnesota. As the physician practice lead, Liz has assisted with the development of our physician and healthcare solutions and has contributed to the development and the analysis of Vital WorkLife's national surveys and research. She's presented on physician well-being at national and regional conferences and has been published in several medical journals. Liz is going to share some powerful findings from our own research on peer coaching.
Thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity to share some of the highlights of our study with you. At Vital WorkLife, we've been providing coaching to physicians and advanced practitioners for over 10 years, and we've gotten very positive feedback from people who've experienced the coaching. But we wanted to obtain a more objective measure of the effectiveness of the coaching. And so we actually conducted a study, and I'm happy to be able to share the results of that with you today. But I'll start with giving you a little background on peer coaching, including prior studies that have been conducted and the outcome of those studies. And I'll also talk about our coaching model and then share the results of the study with you. Why peer coaching for clinicians? Well, first of all, we recognize that this population is experiencing a high level of stress and high rates of burnout, only worsened by the pandemic. And we know that they can benefit by having a confidential resource to share their feelings and experiences and to talk to someone who's walked in their shoes, someone who gets it. Also, there's less of a stigma of accessing coaching than there is for accessing mental health services. And we believe that it also diminishes the fear that many clinicians have about having to report having sought help at license renewal or recredentialing. There have been limited studies on coaching for well-being, and very few that focused specifically on peer coaching. But the studies that there have been have shown some very promising results. There was a study in 2014 conducted at Duke University where coaching was offered to 11 physicians. They had in total 3 to 8 sessions of coaching that helped them to do a better job of setting boundaries and to improve their self-awareness and their self-compassion. And there were structured interviews after the coaching that the researchers conducted. And in those interviews, their conclusion was that the coaching had been very helpful. A more scientific study was conducted at Mayo Clinic in 2019. In that particular study, there was an interest in seeing if coaching could diminish the symptoms of burnout, could reduce burnout for participants. And they had 44 participants in the intervention group and 44 in a control group. And they were able to see that the coaching led to reduced emotional exhaustion, a symptom of burnout, and a significant reduction in overall burnout by those who received the coaching. In terms of our model of peer coaching, what it is that we do and how we happen to do it, peer coaching is one component of a comprehensive well-being program that we offer to healthcare organizations, and then they promote it to their clinicians and offer it as a benefit to their clinicians. So in addition to coaching, we offer counseling and a virtual concierge and other resources that can be tapped into to help with well-being. When someone wants coaching, they speak with a licensed behavioral health professional who conducts an intake and a bit of a needs assessment to determine if there's any other resources they might want to access in addition to coaching, but also to be able to match them with the most appropriate coach. We have a network of 30 coaches across the country. Most of them are clinicians. They represent a number of different specialty areas and a number of different I guess you'd say coaching specialties that they may have. So, some are better at helping with work-life balance, or some are better at leadership development, or some are better at practice management. So it just kind of depends. But anyway, we conduct that intake and then match them with a coach. The sessions are conducted telephonically or through video conference. Usually they're self-initiated. They're always confidential. And again, available for a variety of needs. Usually the coaching sessions are taking place weekly or bi-weekly, and sometimes there are homework assignments that are given in between sessions just to kind of keep the flow of whatever it is the clinician is working on. In terms of our methodology, during that initial intake session that I mentioned, we do ask for them to rate their well-being on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. And then after coaching, post-coaching, usually about 3 to 4 months out, we send an email and we ask them to respond by telling us their their post-coaching well-being rating on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. We also ask them to rate the impact of coaching on their current well-being score on a scale of 1 to 10. And then we give them a list of common attributes or benefits of coaching and ask them to pick their top 3. They also can write in other benefits if they want to. In order to qualify for the study, participants needed to have completed both the pre and the post-coaching survey. And with that, we had 38 participants in this study. We were very pleased with the results, and the pre-coaching average score was 4.97 out of 10. The post-coaching was 7.89, 1.6 times the pre-coaching score, and representing a 58% increase in self-reported well-being. The average impact of coaching on that score was 8.2. Because we didn't have a control group, we really did want to know, well, at least from their self-report, how much did coaching have to do with any improvements in well-being? And again, the average rating was 8.2 out of 10, with 10 being the highest. And although there was some variability, there was no statistical difference in gender, specialty, or years in practice, with the average number of sessions being 5. Of all the participants, 92% showed actual improvements, increases in their well-being, and those that did not stayed the same. Again, I told you that we had this list of possible attributes of coaching that would be seen as most beneficial. And the top 3 were improved self-awareness, improved confidence, and emotional validation. That was followed by developing new skills, improving optimism, strengthened leadership, improved job satisfaction, strengthened relationships, and improved communication skills. What we wanted to do is also offer a few examples, a few real case examples of people who had reached out for coaching, and to base these on the valued attributes kind of as a guide. And the number 1 most valued attribute was improved self-awareness. Not a surprise, really. Strengthened self-awareness is linked with improved relationships inside and outside of practice, greater happiness, and improved professional effectiveness. So in this case, we had a physician who was feeling very frustrated and angry with his care team. He didn't feel like they were pulling their weight, and he would get very aggravated with them, to the point where they were starting to issue complaints about him. And he said, in terms of the coaching, what he learned or experienced, he said, the coaching focused on recognizing what was in my control and what wasn't. I realized, rather than being focused on controlling others, I needed to be controlling myself. And he said that once he had that insight, then it was pretty easy for him to figure out what kind of work he needed to do, what kind of conversations he needed to be having with people, and how to have them in a way that would be less blaming and more respectful and conversational and more inspiring. He said he thought he was becoming a much better leader in the process. He also said that he was pursuing a variety of ways to stay calm, and that too was allowing him to be more effective, and that it was making a difference, that he was learning to accept other people's style, but also by having these crucial conversations and being able to carry them out in an effective manner, he was seeing a change in his work group. Increased confidence is certainly another important aspect of coaching. And studies have shown that confidence and enthusiasm physicians have when they enter medical school has often been significantly reduced by matriculation. And reduced confidence can happen at any stage of a clinician's career. It's actually one of the symptoms of burnout, is for clinicians to feel as though the work that they're doing isn't having the kind of impact that it should, that they're not contributing enough, that their work isn't important or impactful enough. I thought this kind of spoke for itself. This was one of our clients who was looking for leadership development. She said, I knew I was a good clinician, but I hadn't been trained to manage people, and I was concerned about offending people. My coach helped me to navigate difficult conversations and explore different approaches that would fit best for me. It made me feel like I could succeed. And then the third most valued attribute was emotional validation, having that opportunity to talk with someone and share feelings and to not be judged and to be understood and to be validated. You know, physicians, clinicians have the same stress as the rest of us do, but on top of that, they're susceptible to experiencing compassion fatigue and, of course, burnout. This particular situation was an OBGYN who had experienced an adverse event, and she was looking for support. And by the way, in her case, she went from a pre-score of 4 to a post-score of 9 in terms of improved emotional well-being. She said, I appreciated having a peer who had been through a confidence-shaking tragedy, who could talk me through it. Talking to someone who could get it, who had survived it. I looked forward to our conversations. I feel like I appreciate the small things more now. I still worry about bad outcomes, but not in a crippling way. So what have we learned? Peer coaching works regardless of age, specialty, or gender. A 58% improvement in self-reported levels of well-being from peer coaching. 92% of participants saw improvements in well-being with remaining staying constant. And that the three most important benefits of coaching are self-awareness, confidence, and emotional validations. Thank you. And again, I appreciate the opportunity of being able to share this important information with you.
Thanks so much, Liz. No matter how many times I hear about the data and the findings, I just am so moved by the impact that it has internally for the physicians that engage in the sessions, and the 92% improvement that they see, and our average session attendance really was only over 5 sessions. So that just speaks to the power that is within engaging in a peer relationship to address, well-being concerns. Before moving on to our panel discussion, we have 2 more polling questions just to help set the stage for the rest of our time together. So I'd ask you to answer this first question. Have you personally used a peer coach? And I always find this interesting because I think that most of us could answer yes to this in terms of a coach. If we think back to our days of being in organized sports or other kinds of activities that involved interacting with a coach. And this is a great framework to think about coaching for understanding the importance of coaching off the field too, and in a peer kind of environment. I'm excited to see the polling answers coming through here to see that there have been experiences with a coaching relationship. And it's helpful, I think, to really think about when you do engage in coaching, the purpose of that coaching relationship is to gain clarity on goals that we might have, help us look to the future and how to achieve those types of goals that are important. Coaches also can support us in skill building, stretching our capabilities, those kinds of things. So whether it be in a sporting type of environment as a child, or if you're one of those that has answered yes to using a peer coach, a lot of those coaching tenets really do apply when working on our behaviors, on our communication strategies, and taking action in our work and lives. So our last polling question is going to ask you kind of about your own comfort level in talking about peer coaching or offering it or sharing your experience around it with colleagues or peers. I'd ask if you've already engaged in coaching or have done this, answer very likely so we can get a sense of the experience of this group. Often knowing how to start a conversation with someone about getting support is kind of the toughest part of talking about this with anyone. And so we've certainly heard from our clients as well as leaders and advocates for well-being within the organizations that we serve that once they themselves had experience with peer coaching, it became a very seamless way to start conversations with others about the benefits and opportunities that exist within coaching. And it also really helped to destigmatize the use of a resource like this. So it's important to think about how we can share and use those testimonials, if you will, to start making coaching or experiences like this a bit less mysterious. I'll venture to guess that we'll hear some good examples from our panelists today about how sharing these stories and experiences had an impact in their organizations as well. So we can look at our results here, and the comfort level of talking about coaching or recommending peer coaching certainly, spans the spectrum. And I think that we'll get some additional support around how to talk about this and best practices and how to engage with physicians and clinicians around a resource like this. So we feel very honored to have our esteemed panelists here with us today to talk about a solution that is proven, as you've just seen, to have a major impact on well-being of physicians, clinicians, and providers. So I'd like to just start with some brief introductions, and then we'll get into the questions and hear from our panelists. Dr. Heather Farley is the first Chief Wellness Officer for ChristianaCare in Newark, Delaware. Her focus is on advancing the professional fulfillment and well-being of healthcare workers. Dr. Farley completed residency training in emergency medicine in 2005, fellowship training in administration in 2006, and earned her Master's of Healthcare Delivery Science from Dartmouth College in 2018. Dr. Farley is a professor of emergency medicine at Sidney Kimmel Medical College at Thomas Jefferson University. Dr. Kevin Coss is the Chief Wellness Officer for Community Physician Network and co-founded the Center of Physician Wellbeing and Professional Development for the Community Health Network in 2017. He leads the cabinet for the Exceptional Practice Experience and Physician Wellbeing Advisory Council. In addition to this role, he practices internal medicine and has served for many years as the group practice director. Dr. Coss graduated from the University of Toledo College of Medicine and completed his residency in internal medicine at Indiana University Medical Center. Dr. Dorf-Biderman is an ABIM certified practicing hospitalist at Methodist Hospital, Park Nicollet Health Partners in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She received her medical degree from Universidad de la República in Montevideo, Uruguay, and completed her internal medicine residency at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis. She has held many organizational leadership roles and developed programs to support clinicians' well-being and prevent burnout. Currently, she's the Methodist Hospital Wellbeing Committee co-chair. Welcome to each of you, and I know we're looking forward to an engaging discussion today. So to start off, I want to see your reflections on the research that we just heard from Liz, and I want to ask all of you, were there any surprises to you from the research? Anything that stood out to you or anything that resonated based on your own experience around peer coaching? So I'll start with you, Dr. Dorf-Biderman.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. Such a good, important conversation. It's just also nice to, be able to have, collaboration and conversation with others from around the country, and certainly with these two other leaders. So I am not surprised. I speak from personal experience as a participant, a coachee, and directing others, and as a coach myself. My first personal experience with a coach was about 4 years ago, and that was only the first one, really. It was actually through Vital WorkLife. And it was quite impactful. And since then, I've had 4 coaches, 3 of them peer coach physicians, and 1 of them a leadership coach. And it really has been transformative. It has impacted my life in ways that I could have never imagined, that 5 years ago, I would have, never heard of peer coaching, and I never thought that it would have impacted my life. And so, one of the things that was not surprising to me either was the fact that self-awareness was one of the areas that people were impacted the most. As many of you know, who have gone through medical school and the grueling times that implies becoming a physician and going through medical school and residency, a lot of us physicians just go into autopilot and learn how to push down all awareness around what we need. Because if we start looking at it and thinking of it, then it's just too hard. And so once we finish, and then once we are in practice, we continue to work in autopilot and forget what it is, the mechanism of how do we really check in with ourselves? I think it was Carl Jung that said, if you don't make the unconscious become conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And by coaching, I think one of the biggest things that I've been able to achieve myself and help others achieve, especially physicians and other friends who have gone through the coaching program, is really understand that self-awareness. And I think there was a question about is how do you differentiate between coaching and peer support? That is really for a long conversation, but coaching is very different than peer support, mentorship, teaching, training. Coaching really provides this environment for self-inquiry that creates awareness, then followed with encouragement that creates this environment for self-motivation, and also the framework for accountability to take action. So I've personally found it incredibly powerful. I've become a professional coach myself because of that, and I've been able to help others. I'm not surprised, not at all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would certainly agree with everything my colleague Natalia mentioned. I've also taken advantage of coaching. I think when you look at that data in the context of the recent Medscape survey, looking at physician burnout and suicide, it serves the purpose of meeting all the barriers that many physicians find in terms of seeking help for mood disorders or burnout. In the Medscape survey, I think the top 3 issues were physicians didn't feel like their symptoms were severe enough to get help. They didn't feel that they felt that they could manage without any kind of professional intervention. And finally, they didn't have enough time. It was too much effort to find coaching help. And I think the survey just points out that we can address all of those with professional physician coaches. The vital work-life collaboration that we've had has been essential to promote well-being in our organization. And I think before you can really get physicians or other advanced practice providers to jump on board with counseling or coaching, you really have to have established that culture of wellness, because that's where you can be safe, you can be vulnerable, and then you can start to approach breaking down those barriers. If you don't have that initial culture in your organization, I think it's very hard to move to things such as coaching or counseling, particularly for physicians, because of their intrinsic nature of feeling like that somehow is punitive, that coaching or counseling means that I'm not worthy, I'm not strong enough, or that it's remedial. I'm not measuring up to my peers, and that's exactly the opposite of what we try to establish in our organization. So I don't find any of the results surprising. I think what's amazing is that 5 sessions had such a huge impact, a measurable impact on the overall quality of life, career fulfillment, and well-being of these individuals. I think it'd be interesting to look at it, how sustainable that is over time. And I think the other question I would have, it would be how much of an impact did it have on their personal lives outside of work? Because we all know burnout doesn't just stay at work, it follows you everywhere. So it'd be very interesting to see how that impacted their personal relationships outside of medicine.
Well, like both of my co-panelists, I've also taken advantage of peer coaching multiple times over my career and found it incredibly beneficial. So, I think there are pieces of the results that definitely resonated with me, but also, trying to look at it from an outside perspective can perhaps be a bit surprising. So it's specifically that participants cited improved self-awareness, improved confidence, and emotional validation in the top perceived benefits. And I think, lay people in particular may think of physicians as, very confident and, but we all have that, many of us have that imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon, right? And I think that the participants citing those 3 items as the top benefits really reminds us that physicians are humans too. And we need that validation. We need our struggles and our experiences to be normalized so that we can gain the confidence that we need to affect change in our own lives, either, as Kevin mentioned, either personally or professionally. And so, it makes a lot of sense, but perhaps could be surprising that some of these less traditional items, you might think that coaching, you'd be very focused on developing leadership skills, for example, but a lot of those self-awareness and emotional validation benefits, I really think can't be underemphasized. And I think the second thing that stood out to me was the breakdown by specialty that was shared in the longer paper. And I think that the numbers in this study were probably too small to show meaningful differences between specialties. But I'd be very interested to know if there, in fact, are certain specialties, maybe perhaps the procedurally based specialties, who perceive greater improvements in well-being from coaching than others, and why that might be. I wonder if there are themes or drivers that are more common in those specialties that might be particularly amenable to some components of peer coaching, for example. Definitely more questions than answers in that area. So maybe a topic for future research.
Yes, I feel like our colleagues are feverishly taking notes on those questions. They certainly, add to the list that we have too, based on what we've learned already. It has prompted us to continue to gather this information. We were thinking this was a, more kind of a 1 year look at peer coaching, and we're continuing to gather data and continuing to ask these questions, expanding what we're asking and what we're looking into. So I think this is the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're learning about what peer coaching tells us and what the benefits could be, and then slicing and dicing it to help us learn even more. How to make an impact is an exciting opportunity for looking at this type of solution. My next question for each of you really is to have you help us think about your experience. I want you each to kind of share your entry point, if you will, into using or promoting peer coaching within your organization. Share with us about maybe how your organization has used it, any benefits that you've seen kind of organizationally or culturally by having this. I know that each of you has a different perspective on this in terms of your entry point, and I'm looking forward to hearing that both from the larger kind of systemic view of this that I think we'll hear from Dr. Coss. He was on the forefront of bringing vital work life into your organization. And then to the other end of the spectrum, from Dr. Dorf-Biderman to say what it means to be an advocate, which we consider that boots on the ground perspective of how do you talk about this. And Dr. Farley, I know you have thoughts on both of those. So we'll start and kind of listen to what this looks like in terms of your entry point by introducing this into your organization.
Thank you, Sarah. In our well-being efforts, our strategy has been built around a strong program of physician leadership development, and we have an internal leadership program that is a program that lasts about a year. It meets every month for a couple of hours, and so we feel that physician well-being and our APP well-being is driven strongly by frontline, effective and skillful physician and APP leaders. So we've dedicated a lot of energy to our internal program, and we believe that peer coaching is a big component of that. We are actually looking at making that mandatory for our next couple of cohorts, in that they have to at least experience peer coaching. Whether they do all 5 sessions or 6 sessions will not be necessarily the mandate, but we want them all to connect with a coach just to be able to say that they have the experience and know what physician coaching is all about. But we think that as the survey points out, that it has a role not only for promoting self-awareness, which is so important for physician and APP leaders. We try to operate in our organization around servant leadership, which is practicing humility and self-awareness, and also leading by listening to understand and showing empathy in situations. And those are really the fundamentals that we try to teach as part of our leadership academy. And so some of the opportunities that we have had have revolved around some of our leaders don't have any leadership ability, as one of my colleagues pointed out before. And so trying to get them to not only participate in the Leadership Academy, but also to participate with the mentoring and the coaching is available. And we look at coaching as an opportunity to build skills, to promote self-awareness. It really gives, I think, some physicians insight into their own internal sense of control, so that they really recognize how their actions, beliefs impact their lives so much more than these external factors, I think, as one of my other colleagues mentioned. I found it also personally very helpful when we have been working with physicians who have had to deal with a disability or end-of-life issues. Unfortunately, those have been very tragic. And difficult and awkward for many physicians to manage, and even their colleagues. And we have found that physician coaching, in addition to the mental health counseling, which is available, has been extremely impactful and has, again, kept that particular provider connected, It's a person who understands them as a practicing physician. No one understands physicians better than other physicians, I think. And it's provided a tremendous resource for some of these more difficult situations that we encounter in our well-being program. So we really try to make it so that it's not punitive, it's not remedial. This is a growth potential, and we also try to use quite a bit of our providers that have done that type of coaching as testimonials if they're willing to share their experience.
So at ChristianaCare, we have a Center for Work-Life Wellbeing, and we employ a three-pronged approach that may sound familiar to many of you. You probably have seen it in the AMA Steps Forward modules or coming from Stanford University. It's adapted to our own health system, but we focus on those three prongs on personal well-being, culture of well-being, and efficiency of work. And our team's effort in the Center for Work-Life Wellbeing is largely focused around that culture of well-being. So concepts like Kevin mentioned, like autonomy, equity, camaraderie, connecting to your purpose, why we do what we do, and psychological safety, for example. And we do that culture work on mostly a macro level and perhaps on a team level as well. So peer coaching helps us augment, reinforce, and customize those system level efforts onto a personal one-on-one basis for our individual clinicians. But I think we can also look at the benefits and the impacts of peer coaching as falling into any of those three prongs of our approach, because it helps our clinicians foster their own personal well-being. Clearly, that studies showed that. But it also empowers them to create a culture of well-being wherever they're working, as they're learning that self-awareness and those communication skills, et cetera. And then finally, it in many cases also helps improve the efficiency of either their individual work or their team's work. So I think the benefits of coaching can really fall in any of those three prongs that are commonly used to approach well-being work in an organization. And I have to say, as a chief wellness officer for our organization, peer coaching is a wonderful tool to be able to pull out of my toolkit when a chair or a service line leader approaches me and is concerned about a clinician, either because of performance issues or because they're concerned about their well-being and feel like they're burning out. And no matter how many times, and I know we're going to get into this probably in the next topic, but no matter how many times we share the availability of peer coaching, I think oftentimes it comes down to, sometimes it goes over people's head until they actually need it. And this is a wonderful tool when they need it, and they reach out for help, or a chair or another leader or colleague identifies them as needing some assistance, for us to be able to pull out and really give them this tangible value-added resource that we can offer.
Well, and at Park Nicollet, we have had a little bit of a different path with physician peer coaching, because Park Nicollet has engaged with Vital WorkLife for an extremely long time. I think I believe we've worked with Vital WorkLife as an EAP for about 20 years. And about 8 years ago, when Vital WorkLife developed the solution of physician well-being resources, then we added that to the tools that we've had. And it's been an interesting path, because our all staff well-being committee has found it interesting to promote specifically peer coaching, because it's not something that clinicians in general, like Heather said, clinicians in general just are not paying attention to these kinds of resources. And so when we talk about all of these resources, clinicians go like, well, that's not for me. I don't need to pay attention to that. I am never gonna, reach out to that. And so the way that we've been able to integrate it is really through the pandemic, which has been obviously horrible in so many different ways, but it has allowed us to have a conversation from a different level because we've been paying attention to a different aspect of clinician well-being. And this, all of these resources have risen to the level of, well, I now need to pay attention to. One of the ways that we've been able to have more conversations with our clinicians is really bringing the experience of some of us that have been using it. It's been funny to hear that now that we're speaking more and finding more channels and more ways to communicate about this. I've said that one of the interesting things about this past year is that we've added one of our communication leads to our physician well-being team. And it's been an incredible eye-opening moment for us because he really helps us communicate about all of the efforts and all of the resources in a way that we would have never thought about. And now that we have some of those channels, physicians are coming back and APPs are coming back and saying, oh, wait, we have this resource? I've been wanting to get this resource for a long time, and it's been difficult for me to understand how, specifically around coaching. There are people looking for coaches in the community, and now they realize that they have this resource within our family of care. And so it's just been a very interesting road towards communicating how valuable these resources are. We've created videos, we've created communications within our newsletters, and now finally clinicians are coming out. And actually I've been asking some of our clinicians who have experienced this to come along on a journey with me of destigmatizing, the use of some of these resources. And in general, they've been so transformative that they want to share this knowledge with others. So, yeah. You're on mute.
Apologies. Great entree into our next question, because and it goes along with a lot of what's coming through on the Q&A from those participating too. And really it's getting down to brass tacks, right? What are the obstacles that have gotten in the way of encouraging clinicians or physicians to engage in peer coaching? What are some strategies that you've used to convince them, that they could benefit from peer coaching, or that this is worth their time, right? Time is incredibly valuable. And so what are some things that you've done to be able to bring it to the forefront, encourage that, engagement and participation? And then the other part too is, are there things you've tried that haven't worked? Because I think sometimes that's helpful learning as well. So it'll be interesting to hear, I think, from all of you, because there's another dynamic here of this individual and systems components, right? When we talk about how do we help physicians to engage and convince them that this is going to make a difference?
So for us, I think, as I mentioned previously, the biggest obstacle really has been lack of awareness of the availability of this incredibly valuable resource. Our utilization is good, but it could be so much better. And there's so many times I look at this and I'm like, I can't believe why everyone isn't taking advantage of this. I realize that, that's also driven by my personal experience and having had a wonderful experience with peer coaching. So I do think that the lack of awareness is a challenge. And we've certainly been employing known best practices to try to overcome this barrier by, for example, sharing personal testimonials of clinicians in our system who have utilized peer coaching, training advocates who can help spread the word and the awareness of the availability of peer coaching, using dedicated time at our orientation sessions to have our new clinicians download the app to have direct access to coaching. Reminding leaders of the available resources I personally and other members of my team have regular interaction with leaders in our system, and making sure that we remind them that they have that tool in their toolkit, and then sharing the materials that describe the available support resources regularly via our internal communication channels. We also do in-person, especially during the pandemic, we've been doing a lot of in-person rounding on teams and units. We're oftentimes, depending on what's going on in that area or with a given individual, sharing the applicable resources. And this is one that is really helpful for us to be able to share. I think one other frequently identified barrier is a concern around confidentiality. So we always make a point of stressing that our team, our health system leaders, HR has no idea who is accessing coaching and for what reason, and that's completely separate and confidential. And that reassurance, I think, seems to substantially decrease the fear that clinicians have and help remove that potential barrier to help seeking.
That's helpful. I think understanding kind of coming from their perspective, right? What are they going to worry about? What's going to prevent them, and really kind of tuning into that, and how do we send those messages about destigmatizing and you know, really protecting that confidentiality. Dr. Dorf-Biderman?
We've done so many different things because, you know, we've recognized that communicating in one way and only one way is not going to meet the mark. And so we created this checklist in which we remind people to, in which we remind people to just like really create some self-compassion for themselves. Think about one thing that went well today. Think about one thing that didn't go well today, and then let it go. And then find a way to switch off to go home. And then we printed this and delivered it to all of the units. We created some pamphlets that we brought into different areas for both nursing and physicians, where we know that the physician's lounge or the nursing lounge. And at the bottom of this, you know, this was a very colorful thing that everybody could see. And we put it in all of the areas where people are engaging in their clinical day. And so in the, you know, the computer station, and, you know, throughout all the units, we have so many units, and we created a really strategic plan. And at the bottom of it, we added, you know, all of the numbers and all of the solutions. Then we used some of this content, and we figured out how to understand which are the reach monitors, and we put a lot of this information on the reach monitors in different areas in the hospital. We reach out to specific clinical leaders and leaders for nursing teams and EVS teams and dietary teams. And we've reached out to, you know, everybody around. I'll say that the physician population is hard to crack, as you know, because we don't have the noon time where we stop and we have that dedicated time for ourselves. And most of the time people are just, you know, going through and, you know, thinking I am not gonna pay attention to what I need. And so I think the main thing that has made us move into change is sharing, creating that culture of well-being, allowing people to think caring for myself is as important as caring for others. And so sharing those ideas that these resources are there for us to use, and, you know, having specific clinicians share their experience has been really the main thing that has helped us move into an area where other people are starting. We saw a very uptick in the utilization after we started sharing those individuals' stories. And I think the main thing that people just don't, clinicians don't reach out is, I don't have time. I don't have time for this. And before I stop, you know, sharing, you know, one of the things that I wanted to also consider sharing among everybody is that one of the difficulties that we find is that people think, why are they asking me to fix myself if the problem is the system? And so when we ask clinicians to state, go and do coaching for yourself, how does that integrate with the system? And what I've tried to share with other clinicians is that coaching allows us to understand what is that intersection, the intersection of where is my agency within a system that is changing so rapidly that it's not going to stop changing, and how can I stay within the system and create my own agency around a system that, doesn't work the way that I want it to work. And that has really made a difference. When we share with people that we're not just asking them to change without thinking about how the system is impacting them, then people are really thinking about, oh, I am okay with reaching out for this resource, if that makes sense.
I think that speaks to what we found too in our research in terms of where that, locus of control is of what was impacted by peer coaching. So that certainly lines up with what we're finding as physicians saying what the benefit is kind of gaining that understanding. Dr. Coss?
Yeah, I would echo the sentiments of all my colleagues. I think this has been a particularly difficult year, and change fatigue is, I think, hitting every institution. I think part of our leadership is really challenged now with how to lead through resistance, and to have effective frontline leaders, you really have to have self-awareness, and you have to practice that servant leadership skill, which I think most physicians don't have. And that's not just part of our wiring. We're used to trying to solve problems before we really understand what the problems are as physicians when we get into leadership roles. So we have tried to convince our especially our younger physician leaders how important it is to develop these skills, because it's very difficult to lead through change an organization when you do not have that ability to have those crucial conversations and to listen with the intention of understanding. And the idea of fair process, it's not a democracy in these organizations, but trying to help manage that change fatigue and help to get people to move forward and work together is critical. In terms of messaging, I think you can't over communicate these services. I mean, we struggle all the time with making sure people are aware that we have these things. I'm always amazed when somebody calls me and says, I know that there's some kind of coaching thing going on here, and I think I might need one. And what was that number you had? So what we did was we created stickers that we have everybody put on the back of their ID card, and it's got Vital, it's got our RISE program, it's got Headspace, it's got EAP, and it's on the back of their ID card. So we think that has helped some. We've also really put some attention to focus on getting information out to spouses. So we've done direct mailing to the spouses of our providers about Vital and what services they can do to help everyone in the family, whether it's concierge service, whether it's counseling, whether it's coaching. It's amazing how often the spouses will lead that change. I mean, they're usually, especially the female spouses, are usually in charge of healthcare decisions in the family and leading that. And so we have really engaged our spouses with collegiality events, with events led by national speakers about burnout, to try to help educate them as well and make sure that they know that these resources are out there, and that can help leverage sometimes getting some of our providers maybe to consider getting involved with counseling or coaching when they may not do it on their own. So those are some of the things that we've tried to do to try to increase communication. And every event we always have a booth where one of our representatives from our center is there with vital information, handouts, magnets, key fobs, whatever we've got, we're there to answer questions, because there's always a lot of curiosity. Even now that we're in our 4th year of collaborating with Vital, it's amazing how many people still seem perplexed as to what it is and why we do this. So I don't think you can over communicate your efforts.
And if I can chime in just to provide a little bit more context around one of the questions that, around why we're if the problem is the system, why are we providing or asking clinicians or suggesting that clinicians do one-on-one peer coaching? And I think it really is a bit of a virtuous cycle. And I wanted to just share one success story in a de-identified way, because this one really just kind of encapsulated the benefits to peer coaching for me. And this is a dear colleague and friend of mine who's a physician she was an assistant program director in a large competitive residency program. And she aspired to be the program director. Incredibly talented, well-respected, dedicated, hardworking. There'd never been a female program director before, let alone one who had a working spouse and 2 young children. And so making this work for her and her family would definitely require challenges or changes to how things had always been done in the program. including increased flexibility in scheduling. And the existing leadership was giving her quite a bit of pushback. We're opposing any schedule changes, and we're insinuating that she might have a pay reduction if she was, doing some of that working from home stuff. So she approached me for advice, and I connected her with peer coaching. And after some, I had to talk to her about it like 3 or 4 times before she finally made the connection and got on board. But she ended up finding out incredibly helpful. She gained the confidence she needed to clearly identify and communicate her worth, to align the departmental leadership values and goals with her own, and to successfully negotiate to create the conditions that she needed to be successful, both professionally and personally. And I am excited to share that she is now excelling in her role as the new program director. And she was actually able to negotiate a pay increase, and has paved the way for many of her other colleagues in other programs to have the flexibility and compensation that they deserve for all the work they do. So it is that virtuous cycle of one individual clinician getting the peer coaching that they need, that makes all the difference for them to be in a leadership position where they can change things for others and create that culture of well-being.
Thank you. That's a great example. Any other examples, either from your own personal experience with coaching, or those that you've heard about? There's been quite a few questions coming through about how do we really define what happens in coaching, or how is that different than counseling? So any examples or ways to kind of provide a picture of that differentiation would be great.
Well, I think I can take on kind of a short 2-part to that. I also want to share a short story of how peer coaching can help us remain in a system that doesn't work exactly how we want it to work. I have a dear friend and colleague who had been struggling for some time with his leadership and the way that things had been happening in clinic. And it was a very difficult situation, and I recommended that he go and do coaching, and he didn't do it for the longest time. And then we would have more conversations, and he reached out to me as a physician well-being lead, and he finally went. And throughout the time, I saw a change in the way that he was able to understand his own motivations and his own unconscious thoughts about how everything was out of his control, and then slowly recognize that there were certain micro changes that he was able to make that made his day so much better. Some micro changes in the way that he showed up to work, some micro changes in his scheduling, some micro changes in the way that he thought about certain circumstances that changed. It probably didn't change dramatically, and it certainly does not continue to be exactly what he wants it to be, but he's able to stay in an environment without having to make a huge change, not practice medicine anymore, and his sense of well-being changed dramatically. So I saw this transformation in front of my eyes. And the second part of the question, coaching is a very different engagement than counseling or mentoring. The coach is able to, via inquiry and engaging with the participant or the coachee in a way that they elicit the answers that the coachee has within himself or herself. And so mentorship, or in a mentorship relationship, or in a training relationship, or in a typical coach relationship in a sport, the coach or the mentor has the knowledge that transfers to the participant or to the person that they're mentoring. And they say, oh, well, maybe you should do this. How about your next step should be that? And how about you think of this and this and that? Whereas in a coaching relationship, a coach would ask things like, why do you think that's important? How would that look different if it was perfect? And what would you think if this would be a completely different situation? Or what would it be the ideal situation that you would be looking for? And it elicits a way for the coachee, the person who you're coaching, to find the answers for themselves that will work for that particular person at that time. And so that's very different than going into deep historical, psychological, networking, and really more where are we at now, where are our circumstances, and really creating a plan for how do we be successful in reaching the goals that we want for a specific area in our life. I hope that elicits. And one of the things also that people find, clinicians especially find a difficulty, is that they don't know what happens in a coaching relationship. And so when you've experienced it yourself, then you can, explain at that situation when somebody reaches out to you, or where you're reaching out to somebody, when you have experienced it yourself, you can explain how it works.
Yeah, I think that's definitely been a theme we've heard woven through the discussion today about the importance of having those conversations about sharing experience, and just kind of taking the mystery out of what this experience could be like. So I want to thank all of our panelists today for your participation and your willingness to open up about your own experiences too, and to kind of model the importance of doing that while we understand peer coaching and the impacts that it can have. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us for any more information. Thank you again.